Well, welcome to the America First Policy Institute. I'm Chad Wolf. I am the Executive Director of AFPI, also the former Acting Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security under President Trump. Today's event is part of our monthly speaker series on urgent issues impacting the American people across the board. And among those, at least in my opinion, and the opinion of some of our guests here, paramount is really what's happening on the border and our southern border and the crisis that we're experiencing. Let me give you just a few things to put this in perspective. We've already seen thus far in this fiscal year, and we're about 7 months into this fiscal year, almost 1.3 million apprehensions along that southwest border, along that southern border. We're well on pace to eclipse the record number of 1.7 million last year, which was a record in and of itself. So we continue to see records, not good records, I would say very, very detrimental records along that border. Just last month alone, we had over 233, almost 234,000 illegal apprehensions in one 30-day period. To give you an idea, that is the population of Richmond, Virginia, in a 30-day period coming across that border. So those numbers hold every month, every 30-day period is the population of Richmond, Virginia, illegally trying to enter this country every month. Title 42 is also a topic that we'll touch on. I'm sure Congressman Jordan will touch on it as well. It is scheduled to expire or to be pulled down on Monday, the 23rd. There's a court case going on, so we'll have to see how that impacts that at the end of the day. But if Title 42 is pulled down, we're also going to see some detrimental effects and results along that southern border, not only for the migrants, but also for the American communities along that border, and of course, Border Patrol, which we will also touch on today. Let me kind of point out, for those of you who don't follow this, and you may be asking, well, why don't they fix this? Why don't they address the situation along that border? I will tell you, and I think most of my colleagues here will tell you, that this is by design. What is going on for the last 15 months is not an accident. It's not that they're incompetent. This is how they designed the system to work. The Secretary of DHS is on record by saying we are re-envisioning immigration policy in the United States, and they're doing that for years to come. And I think that most Americans do not agree with their direction. It's putting Americans last, and it's not putting them first. So we know why illegal immigration is bad, right? It's not only it defies the rule of law, but you also have secondary and third, I would say, effects on illegal immigration. It's not only the criminal element, right? You can talk about gang members, you can talk about MS-13 members, but you also have to talk about what does this do to the public education system, the public health system, the public safety infrastructure in all these communities when you see hundreds of thousands and millions of individuals coming in that are now taxing those systems and putting a strain on those systems that you've never experienced before. And I think that's what American communities are feeling every day, right? We'll talk a little bit about the illegal narcotics that are coming across that southern border. You know, we have a fentanyl epidemic crisis that is going on in American communities today. And the vast, vast majority, I would say upwards of 90% are coming across that southern border, empowered by the cartels who are making millions of dollars a day off of the human trafficking and the human smuggling that they do. So these are all important things to talk about this morning. But what's going on at the border is just in the views and the policies of this administration. It's not the only thing, right? It's the medical tyranny that they are in the form of vaccine mandates that we see, pushing for further social experiment in the military, climate change, crushing energy independence that we saw under the last administration, excessive regulations, driven up prices, massive spending bills, increasing inflation, and the list goes on and on and on, and our speaker will certainly talk about not only immigration, but about some of these issues. And I couldn't be prouder and more excited to hear from Congressman Jim Jordan, who's been a powerful proponent of not only America First policies, but a true advocate for border security and the American people. Congressman represents Ohio, where he's born and raised, four-time state wrestling champion. I had to hear that story from President Trump quite often, and I'm sure others have as well. He's led battles against government overreach, having served as the chairman of the House Republican Study Committee, founder and first chairman of the House Freedom Caucus. Currently serves as a ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee and House Oversight Committee. And this is where immigration policy, when we talk about border security or we talk about changes to immigration policy, at least from the congressional side, it starts with changing the Immigration and Naturalization Act, the INA, and that happens in the Judiciary Committee. So it's great that the Congressman's here. We look forward to hearing from him, from his remarks, and then after he's done, we'll have a short panel. So welcome, Congressman Jordan.
Thank you. Don't. I always tell folks, don't clap. I haven't said anything yet. It is good to be with you, Chad. Thank you for your leadership and for America First and all the good work so many of you did in the Trump administration, where we had a president actually did what he said he would do. Imagine that, and got more done than any. Got more done with than maybe any president, certainly in our lifetime, maybe ever. And he did it with just about everyone in this town against him. Every Democrat was against him. Everyone in the mainstream press was against him. A bunch of Republicans were against him. And maybe most importantly, everyone in the bureaucracy was against him. In spite of that, got so much accomplished with his attitude and the good folks like Chad and so many others who were working for him. Last September, Secretary Mayorkas made two statements when he was testifying in front of Congress. Two statements almost back to back. He said the border is secure, and then the next statement was we are executing our plan. The first statement was false. I mean, the border is far from secure. Chad talked about some of the numbers, but I've done this many times in different interviews. Go back a year ago, a little more than a year ago, March of last year was the highest month on record for illegal crossings at our southern border until the month of April. And then April was the highest month on record until the month of May. And then May was the highest month on record until the month of June. And then June was the highest month on record until the month of July, where it was like 212,000 illegal migrants come across our southern border. And that was the record until this past March, when we surpassed it. It was like 221,000 in March, and then that record was just broken last month in April, 230-some thousand illegal immigrants crossed our border. So when the Secretary of Homeland Security says the border is secure, it is the most false statement you can make, because we've never seen anything like this, not to mention the fentanyl and other drugs that come across the border. The second statement, we are executing our plan, then he was being honest with us. That was a true statement. Because their plan, as Chad said, is to intentionally overwhelm and just, frankly, we don't have a border any longer. And most Americans, you talk to most Americans, they got common sense. They think the Democrats are, not just crazy on this policy, but crazy. By the way, did you see the statement from the Democrat witness yesterday in the Judiciary Committee? Did you see that? Questioning from my good buddy, Dan Bishop, great member, asked her a question, can men get pregnant and have an abortion? Did you see that? And she said yes, right? My guess is you talk to most Americans, certainly most Americans live in the 4th District of Ohio, they probably say, I don't think that's right? They probably disagree, maybe a little, right? So when Secretary Mayorkas said we are executing our plan, it's one of those moments where someone in elective office, or in this case, in an appointed position, are actually being honest with us. Their plan, think about it, day one, think what Joe Biden did on day one. He said we're having a moratorium on deportations, announced to the world when his administration started. And he said, we're getting rid of the Remain in Mexico policy, which they did. And it's been the courts back in, but they're not really enforcing it the way you're supposed to, or implementing it, I should say, the way you should do it. So moratorium on deportations, got rid of Remain in Mexico, ended agreements with the Northern Triangle countries, stopped building the wall, and as Chad said, in 4 days, they're going to get rid of Title 42. That kind of incentivizes people to come, right? Think about it. You said, come to America. There's no wall to get over. You won't have to wait in Mexico when we evaluate your asylum claim. And we won't deport you. We'll release you to any place you want to go. And when you get there, you can get on the cell phone that they gave you. You can call back to your native country and say, come on in. But probably won't even call. You probably do the FaceTime and show people where you're at. Look, you can come here. Mayorkas will let you go wherever you want to go. And then you don't have to do a notice to appear. It's now a notice to report the change they're making. So, which most of them don't do. That is the situation. It is intentional. It is deliberate. It is premeditated plan to just not have a border. And when you do that, all kinds of bad things happen. We were talking earlier with Mark, the people who make this journey, the harm that happens to them at the hands of the cartel and everything else, particularly women and children. That is going on when you have that volume of people and this many bad guys involved and that much money involved, the human, it's bad for everyone. The fentanyl and drugs, we know what that's doing to communities and to families in our great country. And of course, then there's just the stress on the agents, the stress on the people who have to deal with this whole thing. And not to, 2.7 million, I think, the encounters that coming across and coming through. The stress on our Border Patrol agents and the system, not to mention the stress on our education system, our healthcare system when people are sent all over the country and what that means for Americans. So this is an intentional plan, and I think one of the things we need to step back and think about is it's not just about the border. This is not the only bad thing they're doing that's intentional. There was a hearing, this is probably, maybe 5 months ago, maybe even last fall. There was a hearing in the Oversight Committee, which I also get the privilege of serving on, and that day we had in the CEOs from the oil and gas companies. And, gas was, we all know what the price of fuel is now, but it was moving up back then too, and it was already getting rather high. And in the course of that hearing, one of my Democrat colleagues, Ro Khanna from Silicon Valley, it's his turn to question, and he's pushing this whole climate change and this agenda. And he literally went down the line, each of the CEOs, and he said, will you pledge today? Will you make a promise today to decrease production? Why won't you make a pledge today to all down the line? They had the Petroleum Institute there and all, but the CEOs of the respective big oil and gas companies, right down the line, will you pledge? Will you promise? Why won't you pledge? Why won't you promise? Just badgering the witness like crazy. And I had already done my questioning, but I went to one of my colleagues and said, hey, can you yield me like 20 seconds? I'd like to fire back at this because I think it's the dumbest thing in the world. And my colleague, Ralph Norman, yielded to me, and I said, what do you want, $8 gas? The truth is they do. They do. And we're almost there. If you're in California, you're almost there, right? It's $4.50 everywhere and $6.50, $7 in California. They do. That's what they want. And policy after policy, I'm almost convinced sometimes they want this crazy inflation, 41-year high inflation. Because you look at, they can't be that crazy, all the policies they're doing. But think about just the price of gas, decreased production. This is, I went to college, I majored in wrestling, but you're supposed to get a degree, and I got one in economics. And when you bring down supply and demand stays here, that pretty much tells you price is going to go up, right? It doesn't take a genius to figure this out, but somehow, so Democrats aren't all stupid. This is intentional what they're doing, and you just see crazy policy after crazy policy. I think it's important to step back sometimes and understand. Democrats, now controlled by the left doesn't like the country. They don't. It's sad. When they tell us they want to fundamentally change this place, they do. That's why we need an organization like this who is fighting for the values that make America special. We all know that America is not perfect, but it's the greatest place ever. Best country ever, done more good for more people here and around the planet than any nation in history. The left doesn't believe that. The left doesn't like the country, and maybe just as importantly, the left doesn't like us. They don't. It's why you got the disinformation board trying to come out. It's why you see all the crazy, the weaponization of government that I'll talk about here in a second, but they don't like us. Remember when Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, all the text messages, remember that? Right, back and forth? And Peter Strzok's in the Walmart over in Virginia, and he texts Lisa Page and he says, I can smell the Trump supporters, right? Remember he said that? They don't like us, right? When Buttigieg, this was when the gas prices were starting to go up, Buttigieg says, if you don't like $4 gas, get an electric vehicle. Well, that's maybe fine for some people, but a lot of the folks I get the privilege of representing who work in agriculture, who work in construction, who work in manufacturing, they can't afford an EV. They're driving a pickup truck, for goodness sake. Colbert with his attitude, he said, I don't care if gas goes to $15 a gallon because I drive a Tesla. Of course, he may not drive one now that Musk is buying Twitter. He may have been, but the best one was Anderson Cooper. Anderson Cooper, he's talking, and I can't remember. This is a few months back, but he said Trump supporters eat at the Olive Garden and stay at the Marriott. And I'm like, I thought for a second, I'm like, well, where I'm from, weekend at the Olive Garden and Marriott, that's a pretty good weekend, right? That's pretty, we can't all go to the 5-star restaurants and stay at the Ritz, I guess. So they don't like, and because they don't like the country and they don't like us, they weaponize the government against us. And there are countless examples. Countless examples. This whole, Nina Jankowicz Disinformation Governance Board is one. But the one that I think stands out, we focus so much on this because it cuts right to the heart of what's at stake here, is when the Department of Justice went after moms and dads who had the courage to show up at a school board meeting and speak out against policies and stand up for their son or daughter. I mean, it's real important to understand the speed and the intensity with which the government went after parents. September 29th, National School Board Association sends a letter to the Biden administration saying, use the Patriot Act, treat moms and dads as domestic terrorists, use counterterrorism measures to go after parents. 5 days later, October 4th, Merrick Garland issues a memo to every single U.S. attorney in this country, doing exactly what the School Board Association asked the Biden administration to do, 5 days after it happened, right? Letter on 29th, memo on October 4th. 16 days after that, on October 20th, the FBI sends an email out to agents all across the country saying, put this threat tag designation, this label, this mark on parents who you are in fact investigating, who get reported on the snitch line that was in the memorandum that Merrick Garland said to establish. So think about it. September 29th, October 4th, October 20th. All that happens in 22 days. Ask yourself a simple question. When have you ever seen the federal government move that fast, right? When does government ever operate that quick? But when it came time to chill speech and to target someone whose political views the government disagrees with, moms and dads, they operated at record speed. This is frightening. It is wrong. It is not what the country is supposed to be about. And this is one of the areas, and I guess this is just the way the good Lord worked it out. But when I got to Congress, got put on the Oversight Committee, got put on the Judiciary Committee. Happened to be the two committees that do the most investigations in Congress. And it just seems like I've been involved in every big investigation that's happened around this place. But you quickly learn that you have these agencies and bureaucrats in these agencies who are targeting their political enemies. And again, it is not supposed to operate that way in this country. The left doesn't like the country. They don't like us. They don't like the Constitution. And maybe most importantly, they don't like the First Amendment. This is scary. You think about it, maybe I'll wrap it up here, but every right we enjoy as Americans under the First Amendment has been attacked over the last year. Every single one. Stop and think. You got 5 major: right to practice your faith, the right to assemble, right to petition your government, freedom of press, freedom of speech. Everyone's been attacked. Every single one. There until a few months ago, there were still churches in America where a full congregation couldn't meet on Sunday morning because of the COVID rules. And look, we all understand COVID's serious, and we've certainly treated it serious. But the First Amendment's pretty serious too. I mean, Bill Barr sent out a memo 2 years ago, last month, and he said in that memorandum to the U.S. attorneys around the country. Think of the distinction. The memo the Republican Attorney General sent around versus the Democrat Attorney General. But in that memo, he said, the Constitution is not suspended during a crisis. And amen to that. I would argue that's, in fact, when it's most important. That's when it counts the most, when things get a little tough. That's when we have to have that foundational document. Freedom to assemble, freedom to get together like we're doing today. 1 year ago, I spoke to the New Mexico Republican Party in Amarillo, Texas, because they had to go to Texas to get the freedom to assemble because their Democrat governor wouldn't let them get together in their own darn state. Your right to petition your government, think about this. Until a few months ago, you couldn't go to your capital to lobby a member of Congress to redress your grievances because Nancy Pelosi wouldn't let you in, your capital that you pay for. Freedom of the press. Jen Psaki stood when she was press secretary. Jen Psaki stood at a podium like this in the White House press briefing room. Think about this. The White House, considered the center of freedom on the planet, in the White House press briefing room, the press secretary is standing at a podium and she says these two statements. Most Americans now get their news from social media platforms. We, the Biden administration, are working with those social media platforms to limit the information Americans see. And I'm like, it's one of those statements when she makes it, you look around, you're like, did anyone just hear that the press secretary said she's trying to limit the press, right? It's scary. And maybe the best one is DeSantis is doing a roundtable discussion on COVID. And he has some doctors in there talking, and one of the doctors is Dr. Bhattacharya, professor of medicine at Stanford, who's written in the Wall Street Journal. You've seen him on TV. Super smart guy, professor of medicine at Stanford. And DeSantis videotapes it, puts it on YouTube. YouTube takes it down and says disinformation. And I'm thinking, he's a professor of medicine at Stanford. I told one group, I said, it's not the Big Ten, but that's pretty good, right? It's like, I mean, come on. So this is what we're up, and we got all kinds of problems that we have to deal with and all kinds of crazy things the Biden administration is doing, but the biggest concern I have is what they're doing to the institutional norms, the precedents, and the Constitution, specifically the First Amendment. And it is one of our number one fights, along with this, this situation that they've created now on our southern border. Let me just finish with some positive here, because there's when 7 out of 10 of our fellow citizens think the country's on the wrong track, there's lots of problems. So we do need to talk about some positive stuff, though. But when you think about that for a second, I don't know. I remember when I first got in politics, listening to, some of you may remember this, back in the 90s, Newt Gingrich had these Go Pack tapes, and I remember out campaigning, I'd listen to Gingrich talking about, principles we need to follow and how to communicate and different things. And he would talk about wrong track and polling. I don't know if I've ever seen wrong track numbers this high. When over 7 out of 10 Americans think the country's heading in the wrong direction, that tells you we're heading in the wrong direction. So there are lots of things that need to be changed. But I always try to remind people, it's still America. It's still the best place going. One of the folks I know who's part of this fine organization is Lou Holtz. And Lou Holtz is one of these optimistic guys, a great coach, great American. And he had one of his many great lines. He says, quit complaining about your problems. 90% of the people don't care, and 10% are glad you got them, right? So we need to be positive and never forget it's America. Never forget. The left, here's what I love. The left may control everything. The left controls big tech. The left controls big media. The left controls big corporations. The left now controls big sports. The left controls higher education. The left controls Hollywood. The left controls the White House. The left controls the Senate. The left controls the House of Representatives. But the left doesn't control we the people. And that is what makes this country so different and so special, is the people of this country get it. They know we should be a country that actually has a border. They know we should be a country that respects the ideals and principles that made us great in the first place. And Americans are willing to stand up and do the right thing to defend what made this country a special place. I come from the great state of Ohio, and a few years ago, Polly, who's here with us somewhere, my wife and I, we have some friends. We live north of Dayton. And Polly and I, and I've told this story many times because it had an impact on us. We live north of Dayton, and our friends called us up. Is this time of year, summertime of year? And they said, you guys free for dinner Thursday night? We said, sure. And they said, well, before we go to dinner, we're gonna tour the Wright brothers' home. And we said, great. We love history. The house we live in, just outside Urbana, Ohio, was built in 1837. How we like history and old places. We said, sure, we'd love to do that. Learn about these amazing Americans. See this home, this place where they were raised and lived. So we go down, you pay the lady from the Historical Society like $5. They take you on a tour of this home, and you learn about the Wright brothers. Two amazing guys. In fact, if you haven't read McCullough's book on the Wright brothers, read it. It's worth it. It starts off with a great line in the first chapter. He says, someone once asked Wilbur Wright what it takes to be successful. And he said, pick out 2 good parents and be born in Ohio. And the truth is, though, that statement is really, have a great family, be born in America. I mean, it's really what it's about. But anyway, we go on this tour, and they take you all around. You learn about the bicycle shop and the things they were experimenting with this vacuum system early on and different things they tinkered with and built, and just amazing things you learn. Fascinating tour. Last stop on the tour. It's one of the brothers' bedrooms. Again, I forget which one it was, but they tell you a few more things about this particular Wright brother. And then they finish by showing you 2 pictures. 2 pictures. The first picture they hold up, that very first flight, 1903, Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. And you look at that and you're like, first thing you think is like, how did that thing get off the ground, for goodness sake? And the truth is it barely did. It only flew like 100 and some feet. Got, so many feet off the ground. And you see that and you're like, okay, that's kind of cool. And you sort of remember that from, 7th grade, 8th grade, whenever you learn that in school. And you're like, okay, that's kind of cool. I remember that a little bit. And they put that picture down. Hold up a second picture. 1947, Chuck Yeager breaking the sound barrier in a jet. And then I thought, wow, I didn't know that. Maybe I wasn't paying attention that day or school or something, but I didn't know that. 44 years after two guys fly like 100 feet, another American breaks the sound barrier in a jet. I'm like, that's amazing. And that was the end of the tour. They put that picture down. That's the end of the tour. And Polly and I start walking out the door. And as we're walking out the door, it hit me. Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Why'd they stop there? I represent Wapakoneta, Ohio, hometown of Neil Armstrong, who 22 years after Chuck Yeager breaks the sound barrier, steps on the moon. Stop and think about it. 66 years. 66 years we go from two guys flying 100 feet in this thing they call a plane to another American stepping on the moon. All in 66 years. All in one lifetime. This country did that. No other nation could do that. This country did that. So don't ever let anyone tell you this is not the greatest place ever. It is, and it's worth fighting for. The values and principles and ideals that make us the greatest country and made that possible are always worth fighting for. That's our charge as people who love this place. This organization is doing that. I want to thank you for supporting them, and thank you for giving me a chance to talk to you this morning.
Well, I want to make sure I steal the congressman here, since we have him, to ask him a couple of follow-on questions from some of his remarks. We'll bring it back to the border a little bit. You talked a little bit about having Secretary Mayorkas, DHS Secretary, in front of you in the committee a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. You mentioned some of his comments, but I guess my question to you, right, because most congressional hearings, you're there to learn something. You're there for the witness to talk about their mission. So it's kind of an open-ended question, but what did you learn from the Secretary? What did you learn from what we're doing to secure that border?
Some congressional hearings, you're there to learn something. Some congressional hearings, you're there to go after the witness. This was more of the latter because we sort of knew where he was, but maybe and I guess because it's probably fresher in my mind because I asked the question, but it was sort of a throwaway question. I don't know if some of you may have followed. Sometimes watching congressional hearings is pretty boring stuff, but normally when you go through a 5-minute thing, you sort of know what you're going to ask, and you have a pretty good idea what the answer is going to be. I think it's just a good way to do it. But sometimes you'll just try something and I thought I'm gonna try asking him about the folks who had been on the terrorist watch list who our agents had encountered. And it's like 42 individuals on the terrorist watch list. And the question was real simple, is like, where are they at? Have they all been sent back? And I actually hesitated to ask the question because I thought he'd say, well, you knucklehead, what do you think? We sent him back, we're not gonna let him in. But I took a chance anyway, right near the end of my 5 minutes, and I said, well, what's the status of these 42 individuals? And he basically said, I don't know. And I was like, well, last time I checked, it says Secretary of Homeland Security, and if they're on the terrorist watch list, I think that would be within the definition of your responsibilities to know the status of these individuals. He's yet to get back with us on that. He went on the Sunday shows, if you remember, after that hearing. I think he did all 5 Sunday shows, and he had a better answer. He says, well, we do know the status. They've been, here. But I still think some of these individuals may, in fact, have gotten through and been released, which is sort of frightening.
It's a remarkable stat. That was my second question. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that was a pivotal point in the hearing, which is, where are the 42? And have they been, I think your question was, have they been released into the country? And that was I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Which was remarkable. Let me talk a little bit about maybe Congress's plan. Obviously, as you look at the midterms, but in January of 23, when we talk about border security, what are a few maybe simple things that, or at least in your mind, you think Congress can do to help the situation on the southern border? Obviously, you need a lot of will from the executive, but if they choose not to enforce the law, what role and what can Congress do at the end of the day?
No, great question. That'll be if in fact the voters do what I think they're going to do this November, that'll be the big struggle in the next Congress. We know what needs to be done. It's what you guys did under President Trump's leadership, and you guys having the will to do what needed to be done to secure the border. It's finish the wall. It's put back in place the Remain in Mexico policy. It's not send a message that we're not going to deport anyone. if you send the message that no one's going to be deported, people are going to keep coming. In fact, one of the questions I asked the secretary that day was, do you think you're incentivizing people to come? And his answer was actually, he said no. I'm like, I don't know how you work with someone like that, because anyone with a brain can figure out they're incentivizing people to come. So you have to go back to the policies you guys did that were so on target. Long term, there's the Flores decision. There's the will to say we're not going to have this notice to report. You're actually going to have to appear. You got to put back in the tough policies that make sense, and that are actually going to do the job, and that are good for everyone. Good for, as I said, the people who come here and have to face so many hardships and terrible things. Good for our country, and then have a legal immigration system that we all agree is in the best interest of the country. That's what has to happen. Biden is just not going to go there. And here's the point. Even if he wanted to do the right policies, even if Joe Biden wanted to make the right decisions on the border, on energy, on crime issues, he can't, because the left who controls his party will not allow it. And that's what we have to understand. So you used to be able to work with some Democrats. I think we're at a point now where you can't. What they are trying to do is so harmful to our nation that the only course of action is you have to fight them, you have to stop them. And you do that by making the arguments, making the debate, asking the right questions, and then the American people get to ultimately decide on Election Day. I think they're ready to make a big change here in about 5 months on Election Day.
Yeah, certainly agree. Last question, since I have you. Obviously, a lot of talk out there about the DHS Disinformation Governance Board. We saw just recently that's been put on pause, not disbanded or not removed, but paused, so it could come back. I know you've got a lot of thoughts on that. I'm on record as a terrible idea, but 30 seconds on the latest on that.
I wish they'd have waited one more day, because I wanted to know if Nina Jankowicz would have fact-checked the Democrat witness who said men can get pregnant. I wonder if she was. So if they'd have waited one more day, we could have asked the question. Nina, what do you think? What's the Disinformation Governance Board think about that statement? By the way, think about that. Jerry Nadler had to okay that witness. So that's what I mean when they can't do the right thing because the left controls their party. The fact that you have senior Democrat staffers on that committee and the chairman okaying that witness, and the truth is, all the other two, they had 3 witnesses, we had 1. Our witnesses did a tremendous job, Ms. Foster. All 3 of the witnesses, in a roundabout way, agreed with the other 2 witnesses agree with that individual. So it's crazy. No, this Disinformation Governance Board is scary. It's interesting to see how the left is now attacking Elon Musk, because they see that as somehow a threat to, what also I find fascinating, and then I'll stop, is our Twitter engagement and numbers have just taken on. We've grown like 300 and some thousand in the last few weeks since Musk started the purchase of Twitter, which sort of tells you they were throttling back conservatives like we always suspected. But thank you all very much. God bless you.
Okay. All right, well, thanks for everyone staying on. We're going to jump to the panel discussion. Let me introduce our 2 panelists, colleagues of mine. We have Mark Morgan here to my left. Mark's a fellow at the Heritage Foundation, most recently served at DHS as acting commissioner for Customs and Border Protection, but Mark has a long history at the department, ran Border Patrol, was the head of ICE for a hot second, I would say, before he moved over to Customs and Border Protection. Overseeing 60,000 employees at CBP, a budget of about $13 billion. Just a tremendous asset. When we talk about border security, we talk about immigration enforcement. He's lived it, he's breathed it. He's been there on the ground with the troops every day, so we're certainly glad to have him here. So thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Shannon. Appreciate it.
We also have Aaron Reitz, Deputy Attorney General for Legal Strategy for the state of Texas. Aaron's been on the fight with AG Paxton in Texas. When we talk about border security, there's a lot going on in Texas that Aaron will talk about, not only in the courts, but also, obviously, what is going on the border itself. So Aaron's been in this capacity since 2020, earned his law degree from the University of Texas Law School, veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps, so thank you for your service, and thank you for being here. So welcome, help me welcome our panelists today. All right, Mark, so let me just start off with you. Obviously, you got a long background in border security, not only from how you secure the border, but also how you enforce immigration law. So let me give you an open-ended question here a little bit. Kind of putting in your words and your perspective what you see going on down there and why you think it's occurring today. We've been at this, or I should say the administration's been at this for 15 months. Why is it that we see the situation not improving? Why do we see month after month it seems to be getting worse, not only in the number of illegal apprehensions, but just worse when it comes to the narcotics, it comes to the communities along that border. It also, which we'll talk about, it also is affecting Border Patrol real, impactfully. Just what's your professional expert opinion on why this is occurring month after month after month?
Well, first, let's be clear. This administration inherited the most secure border in our lifetime, and they dismantled the vast network of tools and authorities and policies that we had in place under President Trump and your leadership as well. Congressman Jordan said something that I could not agree more with. It's been done intentionally. It's been done by design. And I get asked this question a lot. I said, Mark, you must be frustrated. You were part of that group that really was able to secure the border more so than any other time under any other administration. You must be frustrated to see it be undone. And that's absolutely correct. But what is equally frustrating for me as an American is the lies that are being told from this administration, specifically Secretary Mayorkas. And this goes back to the intentional part that Congressman Jordan talked about. Think about it. Right now, 234,000 last month, 1.5 million so far this fiscal year on top of the 1.7 million. Here's why this is important. This is about border security. When illegal immigration is allowed to happen, is incentivized and encouraged to the historic highs we have agents that are pulled off the line, leaving large areas of the border wide open, unsecured, unpatrolled. Drugs are pouring in, criminal aliens are pouring in, gang members are pouring in, increase to our national security vulnerability increases. We could go on and on and on. So as someone who's been serving this country for over 35 years, that's the question that I ask, Chad, myself, is why? Why would an administration be doing this to open our borders, hand them over, literally hand over operational control to the cartels, jeopardizing every aspect of our nation's health, safety, and national security? Why? At the end of the day, there's two things that I revert back to, and there's a perceived political benefit. One is we know that illegal aliens are counted as part of the census. There's a real possibility that that's going to lead to redistricting in the Democrats' favor. The other issue is a perceived political benefit is Democrats believe that every single illegal alien that they find a pathway to citizenship is going to equate to a Democratic vote. That is disgusting. It's deplorable. They are intentionally opening our borders up, handing them over to the cartels, allowing drugs and criminals and gang members to pour into this country because they see a perceived political benefit.
So you have a lot of experience, and then I'll get to Aaron, but I've got a quick question because it ties on something that Congressman Jordan said, obviously what Secretary Mayorkas has said. So you've been a Border Patrol chief, head of CBP. In your expert opinion, 3 questions. Is the border secure? Is it closed? And does DHS have operational control of the border?
Yeah, so it's not secure, it's wide open, and they do not have operational control of the border.
I think that's probably reality to most Americans,
Right.
But I think it's important to continue to hammer that. Aaron, let me jump over to you. Obviously, a lot of work's going on. I get the question often, what can we do? What can everyday Americans do? But then what can folks in D.C. do? What can conservatives do? And the answer right now, at least, is not a lot, at least at the national level. But there's a lot going on in individual states, and obviously there's a lot going on from A.G. Paxton's office that you're a big part of.
Right.
So let me turn it over to you. Why don't you give it sort of an overview of maybe some of the court cases that
Sure.
you've actually been involved in over the past 15 months? Maybe highlight 1 or 2 that are still ongoing that are pretty impactful. I know them, but it'd be good to get your sense of where they're at
Sure.
and why it's so important.
Yeah, so thanks so much, Chad. Yeah, so look, I don't have to persuade the audience here that what is happening at the border is an unmitigated, unprecedented crisis. Representative Jordan went into tremendous detail. Chad in his opening remarks, Mark just detailed. It is an absolute disaster. You should be happy to know, however, that even though, because the Democrats right now control every branch of government, there's little, as Chad said, that can be done at the federal level, we are not without options. And Attorney General Paxton, my boss, understands that and is using the vast array of his powers as a state attorney general in coordination with our governor, Governor Greg Abbott, to try to do what we can to at least put our fingers in the dam that's leaking. And it's not just leaking, to be honest with you. I mean, it's exploding open. But we're putting as many fingers in it as we can. So there's a few things that we're doing, okay? I will tell you that Attorney General Paxton, just to sort of zoom out and then talk specifically about immigration, because the Biden administration has been an absolute disaster in every single public policy area, as a result, Attorney General Paxton, on behalf of the state of Texas, has entered into 35 lawsuits with the Biden administration since January. I mean, that's just a year and a half, 35 lawsuits. Of those 35, 28 of them are plaintiff side lawsuits. So Attorney General Paxton, on behalf of the state of Texas, has signed 28 lawsuits, Texas v. Biden et al. Of those 28, 11 of them are border security related. So I can't quite do I think that's like a third of all of our plaintiff side lawsuits are border security, immigration related. But it's not just Attorney General Paxton, it's also Governor Greg Abbott, who about a year ago launched Operation Lone Star. This is what, in my estimate, Attorney General Paxton's estimate, has been successful. It is a mobilization of state resources to enforce state law, to ensure that the second and third order effects of illegal immigration are stopped on Texas soil, okay? Now, some of the lawsuits, I do want to highlight a couple of them. Oh, and I do want to point out another thing. We're not just bringing a high quantity of lawsuits. These are high quality lawsuits as well. Of the suits in which there has been movement in federal court, Attorney General Paxton has won 94% of them. 94% of them. CNN just a couple of months ago, and we have it printed out and like blown up really big in our office. It's a CNN article. They say, Texas, the land where the Biden administration policies go to die. And it's like, they know what's going on. I mean, and now they're getting their footing, right? I mean, they've done this for a year and a half, so they're getting a little bit more savvy, but not that much savvy. They can only go so high with their savviness. But, so I'll just highlight a couple of them, okay? But we've sued, Attorney General Paxton has sued on literally every, I mean, you could go down the list of big immigration-related blunders. We've sued on every single one of them. I mean, there's not a one that we have not sued on. The very first one we brought was the day after he was inaugurated in January of 2020 on the 100-day deportation freeze. So President Biden was elected, and then he was, thank you for the laugh, and then he announced his intent to freeze deportations for 100 days. Just to kind of, we got to figure out what's going on, fellas. We got to just pause everything, stop everything for 100 days. We said, absolutely not. We dropped a lawsuit on the second day. A TRO was imposed 3 days later. And then we got an injunction permanently barring him from just unilaterally pausing deportations. And we said the deportations must continue. And he backed down. But we've also sued on things like Title 42. In fact, we've sued twice on Title 42. And I think Title 42 is what's most on people's minds right now because its expiration is right around the corner. But the first round of Title 42 lawsuits that we brought, we won in court. A week after we won in court and required the Biden administration to implement Title 42, what did the Biden administration come out with? They came out with their new rule saying, yeah, we're just going to rescind the whole thing anyway. So thanks for, fighting us in court for the past year. We're just going to blow up the whole project. So we filed another lawsuit on that. There's also happening in Louisiana. We've sued on the rescission of border wall construction contracts. We've sued on the public charge rule. We've sued most recently on the new asylum rules, which we can get into. MPP, which is now, I mean, we had our Solicitor General, Judge Stone, and Attorney General Paxton were at the U.S. Supreme Court just two or three weeks ago, arguing against the Biden administration about their unilateral rescission of MPP. They can't do it. We think that we're going to fare well. We won at the district court, won at the Court of Appeals. We think we're going to win again, and we'll find out within the next month or so whether we did. But lots more to say about all these things as the conversation continues.
So let's talk about Title 42, because you both brought it up, and it's just around the corner. It's a public health authority utilized by HHS. I think Biden administration has said we're going to pull that down. I've got a couple of opinions on this. One is they advertise this 6 weeks in advance. So, Mark, really to you, I'm not sure why you would do that. I'm not sure. Normally, you make an announcement and you have a targeted audience towards that announcement. And if you're the White House, it's usually the American people, right? But the American people are not subject to Title 42. So if you announce this 6 weeks in advance, who is the target audience? And why would you do this? Why would you do that for 6 weeks?
Yeah, I think I'll go back to my response to your first answer, why they're doing it, and to what Congressman Jordan said, it's intentional. Look, this started back in 2019 during the campaign, right? They weren't talking to Americans. They were talking to the cartels, the smugglers, and the illegal aliens themselves. They started back then saying, hey, our border is going to be wide open to you. So their rhetoric and how they message Title 42 is the same. And here's something I want to talk about Title 42 really quick, though. I'm glad we're talking about it because it keeps this catastrophic, unmitigated crisis that Aaron described in the top fold. It keeps it in the discussion. That's good. But keep in mind, even if Title 42 remains in place, we are still living in the middle of an unmitigated, unprecedented catastrophic crisis on our southwest border. That's even if Title 42 stays in place. Title 42 is in place right now, and we've already had 1.5 million encounters in the first 7 months of this fiscal year, 234,000 last month, the highest month ever recorded on record. So I think that's very important that we keep that in perspective. I keep saying, once Title 42 ends, it's going to be like the Hindenburg crashing into the Titanic, right? Just think about that visual image for a second, right? But look, it's clear. It's another step what we go to. Because think about this. As America is still, the DOJ right now, they're fighting to keep national mask mandates for United States citizens. But if you're an illegal alien, you can come to our border, illegally break in, tell the Border Patrol, oh, by the way, the family of 5 that we just broke into the southwest border, we all have COVID. The Border Patrol agent is going to have to say, no problem, come on in. On what planet does that make sense? And oh, by the way, keep in mind why this country has sacrificed a lot, why we've done things that I think can be arguable that are against our American values. We did it anyway, right? We got tested. We got vaccinated. We complied with all the national mandates. The list goes on and on. Well, the same can't be said for the 157 countries of which send immigrants here to illegally break into our country. Haiti, for example, just one example of the 157 countries. By the way, there's only 195 recognized countries in the world, by the way. We're having illegal aliens from 157 of them break into our southwest border. But Haiti, for example, has less than 1% of its population been fully vaccinated. Multiple countries do not have or don't have vaccines and testing readily available. Yet at a time when right now, I just read an article coming here, every single state in this country, COVID cases are rising, right? Now's the time they're arguing to open up our borders even further in the middle of a global pandemic. And here's the last thing I'll say about Title 42. The message, to go to Chad's point. So the cartels and smugglers, they know the loopholes and they know the changing policies with respect to border security better than most Americans. So just the mere thought, just the mere rhetoric that Title 42 was going to end, the cartels already exploited it. We're already seeing the numbers go up. Just the talk of ending Title 42. We're already seeing caravans increase. We're already seeing mass illegal aliens gather on the Mexico side waiting for Title 42 to come in. Their own DHS own intelligence mechanism says that when Title 42 up to 18,000 per day, it's just unbelievable.
Let's shift over to obviously the state of Texas. You got lawsuits, and that's great, but how, obviously you're in the AG's office, but how is the state of Texas bracing? They're already being in some respects, overrun along that border. And you see images every day of DPS putting up razor wire, concertina wire, and others, trying to protect citizens and communities along that border. What's the thought process there in the state of, okay, we're about to see another surge?
Yeah. Before I answer that question, I just want to add one other thing in response to your other question about this effect of projecting Title 42. The Biden administration's announcement that the rescission of Title 42 is coming, to me, feels a lot like when I was in Afghanistan from the fall of 11 to the spring of 12. And here's why. The Biden administration announcing a date that a massive program was going to be dismantled, a specific date, is to the cartels what, when I was in Afghanistan, embedded with the Afghan National Army, was Obama's announcing that we would be withdrawing in 6 to 9 months. You just announced to the enemies of the United States when they can expect to be able to fully exploit our national security weaknesses. So it is infuriating to sort of have now, a decade later, a similar experience in my mind. Back then, it was, oh gosh, our situation just got really bad. Here, now I'm not there anymore, thank goodness, but now it's the same thing, which leads to answering this other question that Chad had about this sort of bracing for impact. Look, we have Attorney General Paxton is an outstanding leader who has vision and foresight, and so he himself personally is guiding our team, our executive team, to ensure that we are sort of forecasting exactly what's going to happen and when and where it's going to come from and what agency, so that we can have sort of skeleton lawsuits prepared. But it's not just the legal issues. We're also in constant coordination with the state legislature, which during the last session devoted several $1 billion to border security. So we're very appreciative of the legislature for having done that. And we're also appreciative of having Governor Greg Abbott, who has not only used the money that the legislature has given him, but launched Operation Lone Star and has mobilized tens of thousands of state law enforcement, state guardsmen, and so forth for the past year to really crack down on, like I said during my opening remarks, the sort of second and third order effects of immigration, such as trespassing or smuggling. We're not absorbing. And Governor Greg Abbott, as a former Attorney General and a former State Supreme Court Justice in Texas, he's a legally savvy guy, and he knows, in coordination with Attorney General Paxton, how to execute Operation Lone Star in a way that, by the way, we have not even been sued by the Biden administration on Operation Lone Star yet. Why? Because it's airtight. We've got a whole bunch of people who have been, a bunch of illegal aliens who've been affected by Operation Lone Star that have sued us, but they haven't won in court. And the thing stands on such solid constitutional and statutory grounds that you would think that if Abbott were doing something that was out of line, do you think that Biden and Attorney General Garland would hesitate to sue us in court? But they haven't, because what we're doing is straight and square and clean. And anyway, I could talk more about Operation Lone Star, but
yeah. Do you mind, Chad, if I jump in? I want to foot stomp on Operation Lone Star. First of all, I want to say that in my belief, and I've been doing this a long time as well as Chad, that A.G. Paxton and Governor Abbott are doing more to fill the void that's been left by the complete abdication of this administration's constitutional duties to protect the states from threats from outside, hands down. A.G. Paxton from day one led off with the deportation suit, and many have followed, as Aaron described, and Governor Abbott's doing the same thing. Operation Lone Star is probably the leading example. I've had the privilege to go down there. I was just in McAllen, Texas about 3 weeks ago. I talked to the leadership from DPS as well as the Texas National Guard. I got a tour. I spoke to the men and women that are out there on the front lines protecting our nation, putting their lives on the line. Again, the leadership went through and they talked to myself and former Chief of Border Patrol Rodney Scott about what they're doing and their vision, their forecast, and how they're adjusting to tactics of the cartels and getting ready for the end of Title 42. The list goes on. And I'm telling you, every single measure of success that you can imagine, they are being successful.
And It's, you know, you talk about bracing for impact. Mark and I were sort of joking before this, like, man, can the Biden administration just give us a week off?
Just 1 week.
Just 1 week. I mean, you know, President Trump used to joke, we're going to win so much, you're going to get tired of winning. I'm a little bit tired of winning. I mean, at this point, I started here in 2020. I had a head of hair like Chad, and 18 months later, look at this is what the Biden administration has done to us, folks. But I bear these scars in service to our country.
You're not getting invited back.
Huh?
Not getting invited back after
Yeah,
that.
not going to.
And even in my dreams, my hair is not as good as his.
So-
If I can, real quick, I'll close this out. I'm sorry. But here's an issue though, is that in the 2,000 illegal aliens, Operation Lone Star has apprehended. The 1,500 troopers, the 6,500 Texas National Guard personnel that are down there, the tens of thousands of pounds of drugs that seized, more fentanyl to kill every single Texan and beyond, the thousands of weapons, the millions of dollars of U.S. currency that they seized. I could go on and on, all of which would have made their way through the border into every state in this country had Operation Lone Star not been there. But keep in mind, at the end of the day, there's limitations. There's a prior case out there, US v. Arizona, that's I think it's a bad case, but it clearly states that states cannot enforce immigration law. So that's important. So as much as the governor is doing with Operation Lone Star, as successful as it's been, at the end of the day, their hands are ultimately tied because they can't enforce immigration law. And let me give you federal immigration law. Let me give you one example of the 200,000 that they've apprehended. If they come across an unaccompanied minor or family, they have to turn around, hand them over to Border Patrol, who then does what? Releases them. So there is still a limitation by the states, and that's why I think it's important. You'll see in the dialogue now, they're raising some constitutional issues under the guarantee clause in the state's self-help remedy within the Constitution. It's been being discussed more, and I think it needs to continue to be discussed.
So Aaron, you outlined a lot of things that Texas is doing, obviously, in stepping into the void here, right? The federal government's job is to protect national sovereignty, protect that border. They're not doing it. State of Texas is jumping in. Perfect. But what does that do to the state of Texas? You're now expending resources to an extent that you never envisioned because of this. Obviously, this is now having some type of an effect on Texans every single day, right?
For sure.
Whether that funding and those resources were going to the public education system or any number of other public services through the state of Texas, I know you're not with the governor's office, but if you could just give the audience a little sense of those resources are being diverted from somewhere.
Well, one thing that we've proposed actually is taxing all Californians that come into Texas to try to offset the costs for immigration and state. No, but seriously, the costs are crushing and in some ways incalculable. When the state and the public fisc, you know, city, county governments, school districts, state government, we are obligated under federal law and some people's interpretation of the United States Constitution to provide a whole suite of public services to these people. All of those costs are offset onto the citizens who are taxpayers. Okay, so our classrooms are getting packed full. They're not only getting packed, but the English-speaking kids who live there, whose parents pay for their local school taxes, are now their education has already been interrupted because of COVID. Sure. But is now, because they have many non-English speaking people in their classroom, is now really slowing down. Our hospitals are overwhelmed. Our courts are overwhelmed because there are crimes that are now being committed. Our law enforcement, especially in the big cities, are big city police departments, which take orders from hardcore left-leaning mayors, school districts, and district attorneys. City councils and district and county attorneys are not able to actually enforce the violation of state and local crimes. They're now having to deal with all of the fallout that comes from just an explosion of illegal immigration. So the costs truly are, to the extent they can be calculated, are massive. But the thing about illegal immigration is we talk about these awful numbers. We know for sure that the numbers, whether it's a dollar amount or person account, are much higher because that assumes that we're able to sort of spot every single illegal that's coming over the border, or that we're able to assign a dollar amount accurately to each one of these people. We're not. So the downside is it's a huge cost to the state. What does this mean for the financial health of the state of Texas? It's not good. But what it does do is that it cuts straight into, and by the way, it's not just Texas that is bearing all of these costs. Because the Biden administration and the cartels have basically unwittingly worked together to push illegal aliens into the interior of the United States, as Attorney General Paxton often says, every state has become a border state. Every state has become a border state. Now, that's not good for those states and for the country. But what it does do is it gives these states a hook to get into court. So for a state to bring a lawsuit against the federal government, you have to have something called standing. One of the elements of standing is harm. And if a state can show harm that has flowed from the thing being sued on, the state, in part, has standing. And that's a huge hurdle. If you can get over the standing hurdle, your state, and for those who aren't, if you are from your home state, so you go talk to your state attorney general. He or she should have ample opportunity to bring immigration-related lawsuits against the Biden administration because of that harm.
Yeah. Mark, here's a great point, Aaron. Let me give you a question, Mark. It's a long-winded question, so bear with me here a little bit. So we talk about the end of Title 42, right? So let's assume that's going to go forward. The court's not going to stop that or interrupt that. Come Monday, Title 42 ends. Last month, 96,000 individuals were removed under Title 42. All of those individuals would go into what we call Title 8, right? And we hear a lot, the administration saying they're putting a lot of people in removal proceedings, right? But if you look at the numbers for April of all the individuals removed under Title 8, it was 11%, which is about 15,000. Of the Title 8 folks that were released into the country, about 120,000. 120,000. So give the audience a sense of when these individuals come across, they're put in removal proceedings, but then they are released in communities in Texas, in McAllen, in Brownsville, in El Paso, and Del Rio, and everything else. What does that journey look like? What does Border Patrol do? How does that work with the NGO community? And how is, I would say, the federal government facilitating that?
Yeah, so the question's actually, it is a little bit complicated because it also depends on the demographic, right? So I'll try to simplify this as much as I can. If you're an unaccompanied minor and you break into our country illegally, you're going to be released in the United States. If you're a family that breaks into our southern border illegally, you're going to be released in the interior United States. So this period, that's what's happening. And I remember one of the Sunday talk shows that I also saw Secretary Mayorkas, he was asked by, I think it was Brett Baer, and about them being released. And it reminded me back of the Clinton days when he said, well, it depends on what is, right? He actually looked at Brett Baer and he says, well, Brett, what you don't understand is what we mean by release, right? It was absolutely a joke. So let me use the Webster's dictionary of release. Release, right? I mean, so when an unaccompanied minor or a family, again, breaks into a country illegally, they're going to be released, meaning that they are not being detained by any federal agency. Meaning they are given a plane ticket anywhere in the country the illegal alien wants to go, and they're released on their own recognizances. Now, he'll talk about what's called ATD, alternatives to detention. It's a joke, right? At the end of the day, and here's where they get really tricky, is they'll say, well, 80% show up for the hearings. That's a lie, and they're intentionally omitting a key part. They show up for their initial master hearings, but they do not show up for the entire immigration proceedings. At the end of the day, when they get a final order of court removal, they do not comply. So ATD, we know that when they're detained, obviously, we're able to remove all of them that are detained. So let's shift to single adults real quick. Title 42, even though their own CDC right now says Title 42 should be applied to families, they're not applying it to families. About 95% of those enrolled in Title 42 are single adults. Now, when Title 42 goes around, he starts talking about, he used to say removal proceedings. Now he says immigration enforcement proceedings, right? So there's a little thing called ER, expedited removal. And that's what they're really talking about right now. But again, it's a misdirection. ER is basically only going to be applied to Mexican single adults. That's it. Now, keep in mind, the part of the challenge with Title 42 is we remove them quickly, and then they just go right to the left the next day and illegally enter again. Well, the same thing will happen under ER. It takes a couple more hours under Title 8, Immigration Authority, but the same thing, we're expeditiously removing them. The next day, they're going to go to right or left and re-enter the United States. We actually had a Department of Homeland Security say that he actually believes that when Title 42 goes away, the numbers are actually going to go down. It's a joke, and he's relying on the ER and the recidivism rates with respect to that. But here's another thing we haven't talked about yet, and maybe we'll have time, but gotaways, all right? So that's the number of individuals, illegal aliens that break in our country that evade apprehension. So whether you're removed under Title 42 of public health or you're removed under Title 8 expedited removal, your chances on your second or third attempt to evade apprehension is exponentially the highest it's ever been in the history of our country right now. To date, over 750,000 gotaways. Those have illegally entered our southern border, evaded apprehension, and made their way to every town, city, and state in this country. Oh, by the way, 750,000, that's larger than the entire population in the state of Vermont.
We'll try to circle back because I've got more questions on the Gotaway front, but we saw DHS roll out a 6-pillar plan to deal with the surge, to deal with removing Title 42. And I think as you went through the plan, it was all about how do you process more and more individuals into the country quicker and quicker. They had one item on enforcement, and that was the expedited removal that you talked about. Aaron, did you see anything in the plan that would help the state of Texas address the surge that you're seeing?
No, and I think that you hooked on to something that's interesting about what Secretary Mayorkas and the Biden administration believe is the real crisis. They will say, or at least infer, that the real problem is just that, gosh, there's just these backlogs of illegals. It's a processing problem. It's an administrative issue. That's the real tragedy. It's not that we've got now probably over 2 million illegal aliens who have come across the border and all of the problems that flow from that. That's not the crisis, okay? That's just, that's right-wing hate-mongering, okay? The real problem is that we have so many of these poor people who are when they get to the border, they just get backlogged, okay? And so what we need to do is just expedite the processing. So one of the ways in which they've done that is they have attempted to transfer the granting of asylum from immigration judges to USCIS bureaucrats. So it now makes it easier. Before, you could go and claim asylum for a variety of grounds, okay? And you'd have to, if you're an alien who is claiming entry or seeking entry into the United States on the basis of asylum, you would have to go through a pretty rigorous, at least relatively so, process before an immigration judge. But because that has resulted in backlogs, the Biden administration has now transferred the decision-making of whether to grant asylum to USCIS agents, and also lowered the standard by which asylum can be granted. So they're solving their problem in their mind, which is we have so many people seeking asylum, we need to stamp these things faster and faster and faster. So they've identified the wrong problem. To the extent they've offered solutions, they only exacerbate those problems. And at worst, they exacerbate the problems. At best, they do absolutely nothing.
Mark, real quick, expedited removal, because the secretary talks about that as though it's a novel approach, that will solve this massive crisis that we have at the border. I'm not an expert, but I played one. I'm pretty sure DHS has had expedited removal authority since its founding. I'm pretty sure that the Obama administration used it. The Trump administration, we certainly used it. That is not going to get them out of this crisis. You can't, there's not enough time in the day to process enough individuals under ER, expedited removal, to address the numbers that they are seeing today. What's your take on it?
First of all, you're absolutely correct. And again, ER, it's very important. It's good. Its application is very limited. In reality, it's only going to be applied to Mexican adult single adult Mexican males. That's it. Unaccompanied minors coming in. Families coming in. And keep in mind what we call single adults from extraterritorial countries. Right now, there's a term called CVN, and it's for Cubans, Venezuelans, Nicaraguans. Those countries, shocker, they don't take back their own citizens, right? So you have a Nicaraguan that illegally enters our southern border, and it's a single adult. We say, okay, we'll ER him. Call up Nicaragua. They say, nope, not taking him back. So what we did under the Trump administration, we said, oh yeah, you're going to take them back. And if not, this is what's going to happen. Okay, we'll take them back, right? Under this administration, they've given up all that leverage. So right now, they're abusing the use of parole, in my opinion. So now they're actually paroling. Parole is supposed to be done on a case-by-case basis for significant public benefit or significant humanitarian reason. You need emergency surgery, right? And so what they're doing now is they're applying parole to large categories of individuals, right? Because they don't want to detain anybody, and they're releasing them as fast as possible. So ER will do absolutely zero to address the flow. And if I can, real quick, and this is very important, when we talk about, because we're talking a lot about the illegal immigration for obvious reasons, but keep in mind, this is about border security. And so we have to start shifting the narrative and talk about what's happening in our southwest border in terms of border security. Here's where illegal immigration comes in, because the advocates in this administration have you believe that you can support border security over here, but then at the same time be okay with illegal immigration. No, that's BS. They're not mutually exclusive. They're connected. As illegal immigration goes up, our resources are pulled off the line, our capacity and capability, ability to secure our border goes down. That's why drugs are pouring in, criminal aliens are pouring in, gang members, and increased our national security vulnerability. They are connected. As they continue to encourage illegal immigration, their plan, all it doesn't secure the border, it just gets better at processing, as Aaron said, and our border is even less secure than it was the day before.
Let me hit on a couple other issues before we end here. We've talked a lot about Title 42. We've talked a little bit about asylum. Remain in Mexico. Aaron, obviously you guys are suing the Biden administration on sort of ending that program. Right. The court has ordered them to actually reinstate the program. We know they're really not doing that. The question I get a lot, and I'm sure others get this as well, is the law says that they need to enforce border security. Now a court has told them they need to reinstitute MPP, Remain in Mexico. But they're not doing it.
Right.
What's your view? And I know you talked a little bit about a couple of different cases.
Yeah, so Texas was in partnership with the state of Missouri. So Texas does...
Missouri, my hometown, by the way.
Okay, good. There you go. So Texas does a lot of border security related lawsuits on our own, but in some cases we partner with a lot of our allied states. The Migrant Protection Protocols, MPP, Remain in Mexico, whatever you want to call it, we partnered with the state of Missouri, which has an outstanding attorney general who's a good friend of Attorney General Paxton's. And we said, look, MPP is acutely affecting the planned rescission of MPP is acutely affecting our states. Let's bring a lawsuit. We brought it in federal district court in Texas. We dealt the Biden administration an absolutely devastating blow in federal district court. They then appealed to the Fifth Circuit. We dealt them another devastating blow. It's one of my favorite Fifth Circuit opinions coming from Judge Andy Oldham, one of President Trump's appointees. He's based out of Austin. I think it was a 117-page long opinion. An outstanding, blistering critique of not just what the Biden administration is doing with respect to MPP, but also serves as sort of a narrative of what the Biden administration is doing across the board with their unilateral action to not enforce or rescind key immigration statutes. Unsurprisingly, because of the significance of MPP in the mind of this administration. Remember, MPP was a historic accomplishment of the Trump administration, an absolutely massive piece of federal immigration law that these two gentlemen helped to get up off of the ground and execute, that when President Biden was running, saw as one of the few dragons that he had to slay. So he put the destruction of MPP front and center as one of his targets that he wanted to go after. So he wasn't going to just keel over and let us win in front of the district court or the Court of Appeals. So they appealed and brought it up to the United States Supreme Court. The United States Supreme Court issued expedited briefing, expedited oral argument. Again, like I said, just 2 or 3 weeks ago, Attorney General Paxson and his Solicitor General, Judge Stone, were up here arguing against the Biden administration. Look, it's going to be hard for this court, as it's composed right now, I think, to disagree with and, in other words, overturn the Fifth Circuit's opinion. It's brilliantly written, legally airtight, highly persuasive, and we're just right on the law here. It's just put aside the district court order and the Court of Appeals order. The arguments that we have about the illegality of the unilateral rescission of MPP or non-enforcement of MPP is it's an objectively winning argument. So we think that by the end of this Supreme Court term, in just a month or two, that the Supreme Court is probably in a divided court, going to issue an opinion, I'm hopeful, that is on the side of Texas and Missouri, ordering the federal government to keep MPP in place. Now, this is the last thing I'll say. Sort of baked into your question is, well, you know, you can get so many court orders. I mean, the Biden administration is clearly not doing it. They're just sort of flipping us the bird, and they're flipping federal courts the bird. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know that I have an answer to that. I mean, this is part of and Attorney General Paxson says this all the time. If Attorney General Paxson were in command of troops, he might do something different about it. But he commands battalions of nerdy lawyers who really, you know, we can fight war in court. But Attorney General Paxson's doing everything that he can. And if he can get a piece of paper that's ordering the federal government to do something that they're not doing, that may embolden either Governor Abbott or come this November, it may embolden a majority in Congress to sort of put some teeth behind these court orders. But we're going to keep holding them accountable and filing contempt orders. We're doing everything we can, though.
Can I add a couple of stats to that real quick? So first of all, I got to throw a shout out, though. I can't do it justice to be able to explain the amount of work and effort that it takes from the AG's office to do this. I felt privileged that I actually participated in the lawsuit MPP. I provided a couple of declarations, and I can tell you they're working their asses off 24/7 to do not only the original lawsuit, but then to go to the appeal and then go to the Supreme Court, the hours that it takes to do that. So I just want to say thank you, Aaron, for what you're doing and what AG Paxson's office is doing. I'll just give a couple of stats real quick to put it in perspective. So since MPP, quote, has been reinstated since December, so December to April, they've enrolled about 5,000 illegal aliens into the program. And that same period, they've apprehended and countered well over 1.2 million, right? 5,000 versus 1.2 million. So just the numbers alone tells you that they're not re-implementing MPP in good faith. And then another really important statistic, again, the Remain in Mexico program was designed to close one significant loophole, and that was a loophole created by the Flores Settlement Agreement that said that we could not detain families for more than 20 days. That was the genesis, the essence of catch and release, right? Because we couldn't get through the process in 20 days. We had to, by law, release families. MPP shut that down, closed that loophole hard. By February of 2020, we had reduced the illegal immigration of families by 75%, and the Remain in Mexico program was the leading reason for that. And this administration, so not only are the numbers incredibly low, making no difference, but guess who 90% of the demographics they're enrolling in MPP? Single adults. They're not even enrolling the demographic that the program was instituted to impact and close the loophole. So across the board, in my opinion, my experience, they're absolutely thumbing the nose of the court and not complying with the court's direction or order.
Agree. Let's close it out on this one. You guys have been very generous with your time. Not sure this is going to happen, but we're in a fairy tale world. If the Biden administration comes to you and says, look, I've tried everything. I can't do it. I can't do it. What's the one thing, what's the one piece of advice you would give them that, that you could say, if you just do this, it's going to have the biggest impact, but you have to do this? Let me go with Mark first.
So mine, to be brief on the answer, we just did a coalition of 16 different organizations got together along with a dozen former Trump officials from the Department of State, Department of Homeland Security, and Department of Justice, and we signed a letter that provided a roadmap of a series of legislative fixes that needs to be done. This cannot be done by resources. You could throw 20,000 Border Patrol agents at this. You could throw $1 trillion, including building the wall and technology. Throwing resources at it only will not solve the problem, and the problem being securing our border. This is what I say. You need it all, including the wall. So that coalition letter, and I encourage everybody to get a copy of that, it sets the roadmap of a series of important legislative actions that will close significant loopholes, that would decrease illegal immigration and provide resources, both combined policies and resources, to be able to effectively secure our border and protect American lives.
Aaron.
I'd say to President Biden to build that big, beautiful wall. That's what I'd tell him to do. That's the one thing.
Oh, good. That's great. Let's open it up. We're going to take one or two questions. If you could identify who you're with and obviously your question, be great.
Good morning, gentlemen. My name's Chris Orr. I'm a current defense editor of 1945.com, proud to say former CBP officer and ICE special agent, and last but not least, AFPI donor. I guess my question would be primarily directed at you, Mark, although I welcome Chad or Aaron's inputs as well. It's regarding deadly force policy for DHS under the Biden administration. For historical reference, I came in the agency just after the Compiègne and Ramos incident, not to re-stir debate about the culpability of those gentlemen, but to tie it in with the present day. Is there any indication that armed DHS officers, whether BPAs, CBPOs, or ICE special agents, are facing extra scrutiny, if not outright persecution, for using deadly force in defense of themselves, their brethren, and/or innocent bystanders? Thank you.
Yeah, look, I'll go back to part of my 35-year service. I was a reserve deputy sheriff. I was going through law school. I was a police officer for the Los Angeles Police Department. Spent 20 years in the FBI. Sorry, before I converted and came over to DHS. So part of my answer is just general law enforcement. The answer is yes. That there's obviously a heightened level of scrutinization on law enforcement and their actions. We have woke DAs. That seem to be more concerned with the rights of the criminals than the police officers. We obviously all understand the defund the police movement, et cetera, that's going out there. My concern is I still talk to a lot of active law enforcement officers and agents that are out there, and when that happens, there is a level of hesitation that can go into an officer's thought process, and that's dangerous for everybody. Now, I have not seen any specific information out there with respect to CBP officers and agents. What I can say, though, is information I'm being provided is that the new commissioner is one of his first actions was to reopen and take a look at past agent assault allegations and relook at like their vehicle pursuit policies and et cetera. I think that's very concerning for me. That as a commissioner, that was one of his first actions when we know that when illegal immigration is increasing, so are assaults on agents. And I can tell you that illegal aliens are just like a lot of criminals in the United States. They feel empowered and emboldened by these policies. They are challenging. We're seeing a higher degree of illegal aliens that are fighting, resisting, and doing everything they can to evade apprehension and illegally enter this country.
Look at what happened just in the aftermath of I think it was a Border Patrol agent maybe, with the horse reins.
Yeah, it's a great example.
I mean, of course, now these guys, I mean, it's like Border Patrol agents, Customs and Border Protection agents, local police officers, even, you know, in the military, in Afghanistan, when rules of engagement were getting like extremely tight, there's absolutely a chilling effect. There's absolutely, and when you have a chilling effect, it degrades morale as well. And a lot of these guys, unfortunately, they join the federal service because they're patriots, they love their country, they love their state, they want to do something cool and fun. And then they get there, and the Biden administration basically just emasculates them completely. They can't do anything. And when they do try to do something, they end up on the cover, and they're accused of, like, whipping people, right? And then they get investigated, and it's a mess. So to short answer your question, I think that there's absolutely a chilling effect.
And the whipping thing, Aaron, thanks so much for bringing that up. I'm actually embarrassed I didn't think about that too. Look, that's a quintessential example. You had everybody, including, I'm calling out the chief of the United States Border Patrol, Raul Ortiz, right now. There are certain things that happen. We've been there. We've all been in leadership positions that I call are defining leadership moments. And the chief of the United States Border Patrol, when that issue with the horse patrol came up, that was his defining moment. And he failed miserably. He should have gone out there immediately and said that, no, these are split reins. No, they're not trained to whip people. No, they were not whipping people. He should have got out there and supported. Meanwhile, he sat back in the shadows and remained silent while Secretary DHS vilified, scapegoated. The President of the United States got out there and said, mark my words, these are his words, they will pay. And everybody in the administration, including the photographer that took the picture, knew that was a lie, and they didn't whip anybody. But they still let that rhetoric go out. And now the investigation, because I worked in the Office of Professional Responsibility for 2 large federal organizations. That investigation, it's completed, it's done, and where is it? Where, you know what? Where are these agents Beer Summit, right? The President of the United States should be calling these agents into the White House and using his bully pulpit to say he was sorry, he was wrong, and apologize to regain their career and their reputation, but yet you've heard nothing.
I believe those agents are still on administrative leave to this day. And I think it's important, I mean, to put this in perspective, I think it took the administration, and Mark said it, from the president, the vice president, even the secretary, it took them all about 60 minutes to start making statements once those pictures come out. Unfortunately, it took him over 3 days to actually acknowledge that a National Guardsman had lost his life trying to rescue migrants in the river. So it tells you a little bit about the priorities. Let's get to our second question.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Myrtle Alexander. So I'm with the Institute for Academic Management. IAM USA is our acronym. My concern is with our education system and how it's flooding our education system. And so it's overly already damaged. And so with the influx of ESOL, English as a second language for our students, first of all, I want to ask, do we actually have a legal immigration system at the moment? And secondly, would it help for us to have a rally at the border so that citizens can actually go to the border and see firsthand what's happening at the border? We're doing rallies. I mean, we're doing rallies across the country. Would it help for us to go to the border with a rally so that citizens can actually see what's happening at the border firsthand?
Well, absolutely. We certainly have a legal immigration system. There's over, I'm trying to think, I think there's over 75 to about 80 different visa programs that you can come into the country on, from work visas to visitors visas to business visas, and the list goes on and on. Now, I'm not saying that they're perfect. We probably need to have some reform in those systems, but there's a legal way to enter the country, and there is the ability to enter that. The issue, though, is there's no impetus to either reform that system or actually pay attention to it if the border is wide open. Why would you go through a process to apply for an H-2A visa or an H-2B visa or any visa if you can simply walk across the border and know that you will be released in a matter of hours, get to your place where you want to be, and in 6 months get work authorization from the department? It doesn't make any sense. So until you secure the border, which is kind of the message here, until you secure that border and you lock that down and you funnel people into the legal ways to come into the country, it's all for naught, right? So I get a little tired of hearing people saying we need comprehensive immigration reform. No, we don't. What we first need to do is secure the border so that you funnel people into legal avenues if they want to come into the country. And then you can start talking about, well, maybe some of those avenues haven't been reformed in 30 years. Maybe the economy is a little different than it was 30 years ago. Maybe we need to look at that. But you can't do that until you secure the border.
And on the rally part, yes. I encourage, look, I can tell after talking to somebody for 3 minutes, I know whether they've actually been to the border or not, right? You can just tell. When you go down there and you touch it, feel it, smell it, and see it with your own eyes, I promise you, you will come out a changed person, right? Regardless of, and this is what's so frustrating for me. Why is securing our border a right or left thing? I don't get it. I really don't. Look, I served under 6 administrations, both Republican and Democrat. When I was chief of the Border Patrol, it was under Obama. Acting commissioner, it was President Trump. I do not understand. Right now, because of illegal immigration, our borders are wide open because in some areas, 80%, 80 of Border Patrol agents are pulled off the front line, pulled off their national security mission to be relegated to nothing more than a travel agency for illegal aliens. What's the result in that, and why does it matter, and why should it matter to you? Is because that results in the cartels exploiting that traffic of illegal immigration. That means areas to the right, to the left are wide open, unsecured, unpatrolled. What are the cartels doing? Not only using the illegal aliens for distractions, but they're taking advantage of those areas being wide open. That's where drugs are pouring across. Right now, 2 years back-to-back of 100,000 Americans died from drug overdose in this country. This past year, 107,000. That's more Americans have died in a 12-month period of drug overdoses than the Vietnam War, Iraq War, Afghanistan, and all Americans combined of terrorist attacks in this country combined. This is insanity. And we know the leading cause of deaths in adults between 18 and 45 is fentanyl. And we know from DEA reporting that 95% of fentanyl, where does it come from? From our freaking wide open southwest border. We know 750,000 gotaways, and we know in those gotaways that make their way to every town, city, and state in this country are murderers, rapists, pedophiles, aggravated felons, and gang members. You heard Congressman Jordan, talk about the 42 illegal aliens apprehended on the FBI's terror screening database. How many more illegal aliens on the TSDB are among the 750,000? Jeopardizing our national security. This is insanity. This is about border security. I do not understand how this became a political issue to protect American lives and secure our borders.
Thank you, Mark.
Sorry, I get
Mark gets a little fired up. Aaron, any closing remarks?
No, nothing to add. I mean, look, get to the border, expose it. The more that a diversity of groups and interests go to the border. So you said you're in education, having sort of an education perspective at the border to share with your supporters and your networks is always illuminating and beneficial to the broader cause to secure the border.
Well, let's thank both Mark and Aaron. They're great patriots for what they do on border security each and every day, but just great patriots on defending liberty and freedom. So thank you for being here. Thank everyone for being here. One note, next speaker series, June 21st. We're going to have a lot of champions in here talking about the right to life, probably on the heels of the Dobbs case. So look for that. Go to the AFPI website, and you'll find more about it. So thank you.